Thank you. South School was constructed in the early 1970s. When we moved to town in 1987, portables were introduced as a short-term fix. And I think the message was that this was 5 to 7 years and get us through some tough economic times. We find ourselves in challenging times today, and those portables now are nearly 20 years in age and deteriorating. Tom and Don both mentioned some of the fire and safety concerns that exist currently. And not only am I a proponent for the current bond, I think, April, to your question, I would encourage the school board to come back immediately next year. But for the safety of 650 students and staff and teachers, I think we need that. We just recently had an incident, thankfully no one was harmed, where an individual approached a private preschool. And South School, as North School was formerly, has the office in the center of the building. So there's no security provisions. So in addition to the fire and safety concerns mentioned, I think that's paramount. Don's correct. I think the average homeowner would see an increase annually of $35 for the bond. So I would encourage voters to support that on March 11th.
Thank you. Deb?
Well, I served on the Londonderry Leadership Committee, and I had an opportunity to go to the South School and view it, and I was absolutely appalled. Besides the safety issues, we have health issues. Those students are encountering health issues, and I think the other thing that we need to take a look at is the town of Londonderry prides itself on its school system. And I think that's one area that if we're also looking at attracting and keeping homeowners, they may consider on that side of the town, gee, my child would have to go to that school. Maybe I won't purchase a home over there. Maybe I'll purchase it elsewhere on the other side of town. So you're also going to look at property values and the impact that it's going to have, besides the common sense things of safety code and health issues. So if $35 per taxpayer, to me, is a cheap price to pay for the economic and the health standards for their children and for their town, and to attract people to this town, I think it's a no-brainer. That definitely needs to be considered. Also, I want to say, I think Tom hit it on the head. It's terrible that we have to look at a strategy and marketing to sell this. This is common sense, but I think Tom's absolutely correct. And I don't know if anyone has put together a video of going through that school and using our access center to show the taxpayers what these children are enduring every day. I don't know if anyone has considered that. For time is valuable. A lot of taxpayers may not be aware of what's going on. So that's my feeling on that.
Yes. One other quick point. I would like to acknowledge the school board and the building committee for their efforts. The original proposal was $5.5 million, and they did go back and look at re-engineering and cost efficiencies, and they did cut some things from the original plan to get to the 5.1. So there was a $400,000 reduction from what the original building had been proposed at.
Okay, thank you. Trent, your question.
Voters next month are going to be considering a $24 million operating budget. What are its biggest flaws?
Now you're speaking on the town side rather than the school side of things,
Yes.
right? Okay. Well, let's start with you, Don, on that one.
Well, frankly, I am rather new to this, so I'm going to be very, very brief and say I frankly don't know. That's something that I think is information that really comes from an in-depth analysis of it. And I don't have access to that, have not had access to at this point, because I also realize that in the process, the devil's in the details. So I can sit down and look at a spreadsheet, or I can listen to a video presentation of the budget committee meeting, but it really doesn't give me an analysis, a comfortable analysis and understanding of what the issues are. So I really frankly don't know, and would not know until I really sat down and looked at it.
Okay, Mark?
Thanks for the question, Trent. I'm not sure that I would call it a flaw, but I do have here a copy of the Manpower and Succession Plan. This is something that I take particular pride in having initiated and with support of my fellow counselors, was established in August of 2007. It's a detailed orientation for the taxpayer as well as for the governing body, in this case the town council, to work with the town manager and the department heads at establishing roles and responsibilities for virtually all 200 or so headcount that we have in the town payroll, about 15 of which are part-time or temporary, about 185 full-time permanent employees. We can't kid ourselves. It's a $24.9 million budget, of which nearly 85% is payroll-related. I, as you may know, having reported the meetings, made a motion during the budgetary process this year on the council to reduce the budget by $250,000, and I specified that that be done with reduction or cross-training or retraining of headcount. So it wasn't necessarily a reduction in 4 to 5 headcount, but it was to look at that equivalent savings. So don't know that it's a flaw, but I think it's certainly the gorilla in terms of the budget, with about 85% being payroll related. I don't know, it's always this balancing act. On the one hand, you've got the pocketbook of the taxpayer, and on the other hand, we've got a responsibility to citizens to provide essential services. Ultimately, the voters will decide. No differently, the 15th of March with the school, or the 11th of March with the 11th of March with the school, and the 15th of March with the town budget, they will ultimately determine if they want to approve or amend that budget. So I think it's manpower planning that's going to be critical, not only this year, but in the years to come, in terms of controlling expenses.
Thank you. And Deb?
Well, I'm definitely a newcomer, but I have been listening to the meetings, and I do work with budgets and restructuring every day. And the term flaw was used. I think people are making smart decisions with the best information that they have. I think that now some of the prioritizing, perhaps, some of the restructuring of manpower and roles that they play may be looked at. I think comparative analysis have already been looked at. I think it's a new way of thinking. Companies are outsourcing and restructuring every day. And I think it's new for everyone in communities and companies, how to look at a new way of meeting the demands of being an outstanding community, and also informing, in some cases, an apathetic community. And it is a way of changing things. We can be instrumental in doing that, and just informing the taxpayers of what they're actually voting on when they go to that booth. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Tom?
Thank you, Joe. The budget, the town budget, I think is, the way it's been put together this year, it represents several $100,000 below default as defined by the state. That's nice, but I think there are some opportunities, some continued opportunities that we haven't taken advantage of yet, because we haven't achieved, you heard in the previous debate, the term consensus. We haven't achieved consensus among the larger or critical mass of the elected officials around combining like services. Services like human resources, services like payroll, services like library management. These types of services are generic enough that we could go across the 3 governments in town, and we could carve out some significant savings by taking advantage of the leadership groups in each of those 3 governments and combining them, as if we were to behave the way a city might behave, while preserving the small town and town meeting type of governments we have that are indeed separate. A lot of our citizens don't know about how the governments are set up, but there are 3 separate governments in town. But we can behave in a more collaborative way to save money through combining these services, and we could, through different